I'll start it here. I'm going to start it, and then I'm obviously going to tell you, give it like 10 seconds before you start talking, Cheryl, and then Cheryl, tell them we're going to be starting shortly, let the people come in because it takes a little bit of time, then give your spiel.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So we're going to let people come into the room, and then we'll get started. Welcome to all. I always feel like we should push aside the curtain or have the curtain rise. So I think we're good. So good evening. I'm Cheryl Ziegler. I'm the Director of Library and Archives for the Union League Club of Chicago. On behalf of the Library Committee and the Literary Subcommittee, welcome to our Cocktails and Conversations with Chicago Authors series. Tonight we're featuring Kathleen Rooney in conversation with Donna Seaman. But before we get started, I'd like to share a few details on how this evening will work. We would love, love, love to have your questions. So please put your questions into the Q&A, and we'll be addressing them either throughout the program or during the last half of the program. Also, I just put up 2 trivia questions, and I'm gonna have to repost those. I'm gonna be putting 2 trivia questions up about pigeons into the chat, and the first 2 people who privately chat message me a correct answer will receive a signed copy of Kathleen's book with this lovely pigeon stamp on it. I love that. And the second 2 people will receive a lovely wind-up pigeon as a memento of this occasion. So those are our wonderful parting gifts. So let's meet tonight's guests. Kathleen Rooney is a founding editor of Rose Metal Press, a nonprofit publisher of literary work in hybrid genres, as well as a founding member of Poems While You Wait, a team of poets and their typewriters who compose commissioned poetry on demand. She teaches in the English department at DePaul University, and her most recent books include the national bestseller, Lillian Boxfish Takes a Walk, and The Listening Room, a novel of Georgette and Lou Magritte. Her new novel, Cher, and Major Whittlesey, based on a true story of the Great War, was published on August 11 of 2020. A winner of the Ruth Lilly Fellowship from Poetry Magazine, she's the author of 9 books of poetry, fiction, and nonfiction. Her reviews and criticism have appeared in numerous newspapers and magazines. She lives in Chicago with her spouse, the writer, Martin Say. And then we have Donna Seaman. She's the editor for adult books at Booklist, a member of the content leadership team for the American Writers Museum, and a recipient of the Louis Shore Award for Excellence in Book Reviewing, the James Friend Memorial Award for Literary Criticism, and the Studs Terkel Humanities Service Award. Donna has written for numerous newspapers, been a writer in residence for Columbia College and Columbia College Chicago, and has taught at Northwestern University and the University of Chicago. Her author interviews are collected in Writers on the Air, Conversations About Books, and she is the author of Identity Unknown, Rediscovering 7 American Women Artists. Donna also lives in Chicago. So thank you both for being here. I'm excited to hear your conversation about Kathleen's new book. I'm going to step away and let you all talk about Kathleen's book.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you.
So I thought I would begin with a kind of a general question about your work, which I have read much of, as you know. So I'm curious about your interest in real life figures. In Robinson Alone, you portrayed poet and writer Weldon Keys. In Ode Democracy, your novel, you have a character based on Senator Dick Durbin, among others. In Lillian Boxfish Takes a Walk, you imagine ad writer and poet Margaret Fishback. So in your newest book, your Amazing War novel, you introduce us to two survivors of World War I, Cher and Major Whittlesey. So I want to ask you why real life figures inspire you and what the challenges are to write biographical fiction.
Yeah, I like that question, and thank you so much for being my interlocutor and for noticing that trend across my work. And so I think I'm really drawn to real life figures, not just in the distant past, but also the recent past. Like you say, the Oh Democracy is about 2008, but the crazy thing about time is it keeps going in that one direction, and so eventually everything becomes historical given enough time. And I think I'm someone who, like, as a kid, always wanted to be a detective before I knew that, like, being a private investigator was not as romantic in real life as, a Raymond Chandler novel. I wanted to solve mysteries and, like, get to the bottom of things. And so I think that in a way, history or real events afford a similar, like, real life detective opportunity, because even stuff that was well known in its era often gets forgotten and has to be sort of unearthed. And I think, in the case of Cher and Major Whittlesey, I want to just, like, tell the story early on, because I think I see him in the guest list. Brian, my former student, who's the one who first told me about Cher and Major Whittlesey, I think part of the reason I have this, like, rediscovery trend in my work is there's so much stuff that we don't know. And, like, I always fancied myself a pigeon person and a World War I person. And, I thought I knew all this stuff about pigeons and all this stuff about World War I, and I did. But, I read Brian, my former student's piece in a class called Writer as Urban Walker, and he mentioned Cher Ami. And I had this really, like, mind-blowing, humbling experience of realizing that even I, as this, devoted World War I historian, of the armchair variety, had never heard of this true story. So I think I love that, opportunity to find stuff that, if not unknown to most people, is at least unknown to me. And then I can do that detective work of digging it up and showing it to other people.
So, well, let's start with Cher, because you do a very challenging thing in this novel, which is you have two narrators, one human, we'll talk about which, and one homing pigeon, a British homing pigeon who is dragooned into the Great War to serve with the Americans. How can you write from a pigeon's point of view?
That's a great question. And I think, the answer lies in why I love fiction so much in the first place. I think that I love all the genres, and I write poetry, I write nonfiction, and I like them all, and I would never want to pick a favorite. But I think what strikes me as the most magical thing about fiction is the way that it lets you, like, leap over the boundary of self that normally divides you from pretty much everyone else, and see what it's like to be someone different than you, and to not just, like, intellectually see it, but to, like, feel it in a physical, embodied way. Like, you feel with their heart and you see from their eyes, and you also think with their brain. And so I think if we believe that people can write fiction at all, which we do, or at least the people here do, then it makes sense that we should be able to write and read fiction from an animal perspective. So I think, if fiction gives us that access to that private, usually secret, interior consciousness, then it makes sense to me to sort of write from a pigeon. So hopefully that kind of answers the question.
There's so many intriguing aspects of Cher. Throughout the novel, you teach us a lot about pigeons. And, us city people often have a very negative view of pigeons, and you correct that in many ways, but you also imbue your narrator with a lot of human traits and a lot of commentary on human nature. And there's other pigeons that Cher converses with. So you've created a society, kind of.
Yeah.
Was it part of your mission to educate us about the beautiful aspects of pigeons?
Yes, it was. And I think maybe this might be, I have like a passage that kind of does that. Would this be a good time to read that? And then I can
Yeah,
speak that question a little bit. I feel like that's the perfect setup, and then I'll kind of circle back. So
that'll be great. Thank you.
yeah, so I'm just gonna, read for like 5 minutes, and then we'll, get back to the conversation. But I think, those of you who haven't read it yet, just need to know that it's based on this true life story, this true life incident of the Lost Battalion. And, while that all gets covered in the book, you also get this trajectory of both of the main characters as they go through childhood and go through their early lives. And then they meet in the pocket in the Lost Battalion incident, and then they diverge. And so I think sometimes the title of the book makes it sound like it's this like buddy comedy or like this road movie where there's like Charles Whittlesey and then Cher is this like sassy pigeon on his shoulder. And it's not really like that. They're together for a brief time, but it's really about both of them. And so the book goes back and forth between their perspectives. And so I think, Donna, to your question, this is a moment where you sort of see that animal society and that pigeon voice coming through. So this is where Cher has been donated to the war effort, and she's on this train on her way to Dover to cross the English Channel and go to France. So she's off to be whatever the pigeon version of a soldier is. As directed by a soldier, John loaded our wicker basket onto a military train. It was a dulcet day in early May. Even the snorts of the engines and the stink of the coal smoke couldn't disguise the luxuriant smells of damp earth and unfurling plants. By way of farewell, John checked the food and water in our basket and patted its top shut with his great paw of a hand, that hand which had a hand in raising us all. Well, my birds, he said, his voice bearing an unaccustomed rasp, I wish you bon voyage and good luck. When the Hun marched off to the front in August of 14, the Kaiser told him, you'll be home before the leaves have fallen. Now if it ain't the spring of 1918. I hope you lot can help the Yanks put the stop to it. He waved and turned, and the soldier slid the door to the boxcar shut. The circumstances of our transportation seemed so normal that I had to remind myself as my eyes adjusted to the half-light that this was no typical Saturday trip. John wasn't shipping us off to a race. Aboard the boxcar with us, and adding to the odor, comforting, mind you, to us country pigeons, were half a dozen horses and a pair of mules. Wood chips and dust, leather and molasses, sweat and manure. Most pigeons are fond of horses. Once we put aside the obvious difference in size that inclines us to think of them in almost geographical terms, we find them quite easy to understand and sympathize with. The train pulled out, heading south and west toward the junction at Kingham, and we animals settled in place, braced against the boxcar's rocking. Are you messenger pigeons? One of the mares asked. We are indeed messenger pigeons, said Thomas Hardy. And that's the thing, it's not Thomas Hardy, the British poet, who I love. It's a pigeon, it's her brother, who's been named Thomas Hardy by John because John gets creative with the pigeon names. So, said Thomas Hardy, his voice raised above the train whistle's shriek. Are you war horses? So they've told us, the mayor replied, though we'd rather not be. Why not? I asked. I thought horses love war. The mare snorted, as did her 5 compatriots. Men love war, she said. Kings love it, and so do their poets. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. 1,200 if you count the horses. Most of those men survived the charge of the Light Brigade. Most of those horses didn't. The poets don't rhyme about that, do they? That struck me as cynical, but not false. The horse kept her head low, shifting her hooves to the train's chuff as it picked up speed. Our groom told us that horses can't even charge in this war, she said. The battlefield's all pits and barbed wire. We'll just haul supplies to the front lines. What's wrong with hauling supplies? Said one of the mules in her heavy canvas halter. Nothing at all, Edna dear, said the horse, clearly accustomed to placating her comrade. I'm just explaining to these birds how far removed our war will be from the gallant cavalry exploits of old. Just because you dray horses can trace a sliver more of your heritage back to Alexander's stallion Bucephalus, that doesn't mean your authorities on combat, said Edna. Many animals of many sorts will help our humans win their war. After all, who's to say what they need from us exactly? I've heard a story about sailors on the HMS Glasgow who keep a pig as a mascot. They took him from a German cruiser and kept him for a lucky charm instead of eating him. An exception that proves the rule, said the horse. The sailors know they're no different than the pig. They spared it just as they'd want to be spared, and because sparing it made them feel powerful, although they're not. If they thought any of us were ever coming back, then the British government wouldn't have to force the farmers to donate us. You're not here on your own accord, are you, birdies? Of course we're not, I answered, the fresh straw in the basket fragrant beneath my claws, but we're honored to be going. We're ready to put our skills to use for something besides winning prize money. The horse hoisted her head to peer at me with her beetle black eye. I suppose if I were flying over the trenches instead of toiling in the muck, then I might think the same. None of us has a choice, so it really doesn't matter. As for me, I'll do my job, but I'll do it with my eyes open, not fogged with slogans of shared sacrifice. Our injured stableman told me a tale about the children of Lord Kitchener and a letter they wrote to him. Please spare our pony Betty. It would break our hearts to see her go. And was Betty spared? Asked Edna the mule. You bet your tail she was, said the mare with a toss of her mane. We sank into a momentary silence. From the inside of our basket, between the planks of the boxcar, we could see the countryside clipping along. Land that only a few weeks ago had been brown and drab beneath us on our practice flights now flashed by in verdant grass and blinking bloom, apple, cherry, and pear trees filling the air with blossoms. I still say they'd be lost without us, Thomas Hardy piped up, cheerful as was his welcome way, a way I never shared but miss. The humans, I mean. I've heard that they call George Clemenceau the tiger to make him sound brave. Edna brayed. I've heard that they call Lloyd George the goat, she said, because he's as randy as a billy when it comes to the ladies. They also say, said another of the horses, that he's hung like one of us, as the phrase goes. And so the ride went on from Kingham through Oxford toward London along the Thames, stopping now and then for water or coal or to be shunted onto a longer train. And our conversation went on in this crasser vein, which I would learn is typical among man and beast alike in times of war, talk of death, giving way to talk of sex. As we rolled along, I also thought about what Thomas Hardy had said, the idea that humans need us to understand themselves. Later on the battlefield, I would come to see soldiers befriend the field mice and wrens who ventured into the trenches seeking morsels of food. Even the smallest creature, a spider on her web, could give a man the mercy of taking his mind off the violence raging at all hours, reminding him that the earth still retained some forms of order, even within the catastrophe. So that, I think, Donna, to come back to your really good question about like, was part of my mission to like change people's perception of pigeons. Absolutely, and I'll resist going on and on because I can sound like a crazy pigeon lady. I mean, you can tell that I'm really into pigeons. But I hope that in addition to making us see pigeons differently, it causes readers to consider the way that they see animals and the way that society historically has seen animals and all these different ideas of, the metaphors we borrow from the animal world and the way that traditionally people see themselves as above nature when really we're animals too, in a way.
Yes, beautifully well put. It's so much to think about in this novel. And I love a novel that is able to tell a great story, keep us turning the pages, but also make us think about really profound issues and sort of overlook aspects of humans' central, our feeling that we're the center of the universe. And we're not. We have a lot of power, but so Cher Me is she offers a great perspective on humankind. And I want to talk about how you treat war in this novel. But before we do that, let's talk about your second narrator, Charles Whittlesey, who was a real person. Maybe you could tell his story a little bit and talk about narrating in his voice. With Cher Me, the world was open to you because who knows what a pigeon really sounds like. But when you narrate from a human being, there's some expectations, I would say. Yeah.
That's a great question because as far as we know, pigeons don't leave behind, a written record or anything that we would understand as an archive, but humans do. And so, Charles Whittlesey was a real person. And I think what drew me to him when I was sort of like on the Wikipedia page after reading Brian's piece was that he was this kind of unlikely hero. Like people, time and again now and then also at the time, because he was so famous. I mean, this story got picked up by newspapers all over the world, especially the New York papers. So he was just written about and written about. And they almost all commented on how he was the last person you would expect to be a hero, because he was really bookish, he was very scholarly, he was a great student, he went to Williams College in Massachusetts, he went to Harvard Law, he worked on Wall Street doing really kind of arcane contract stuff, was really good at financial stuff. And so he just wasn't, you know, he wasn't an outdoorsy, like hale and hearty guy that you would think would be very gung-ho. And yet, under the circumstances of the pocket, everyone who survived said what an incredible leader he was. And so I think even just with the basic facts of his story, I found myself admiring him immensely, and also being very curious, because there seems to be that tension between like the hero he became and who he really was. And so I tried to be faithful to what the historical record showed, but then also write it in a way. The hardest thing for me, and I hope I did it, was to not just flatten him into like the paper cutout of a hero that everyone, the government, the papers did in his lifetime. I wanted to show him as this rounded, like funny, witty, complicated, flawed person. So I think that was the big challenge of writing Charles Whittlesey.
Oh, and so interesting to hear you say that. So many things pop into my mind, of course. One of them is that, you know, we know what happens to these two characters early on because Cher is telling her story really now. Somehow her spirit is alive, even though she's in the Smithsonian Institution in a case. I love that. And then Witch, as he's called, is also reflecting on his story. So we know their fates. We know what war did to them. And we also know that they were heroes, and then that their lives were hijacked and their stories were hijacked to use as propaganda, and that this harmed them. So that's a very interesting part of your reflections on war, is how the story is told about war and how it's shaped for political reasons. So you also add a whole other dimension to these two characters that nobody could know about, and that is their gender and sexuality. They're kind of secrets. And I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit. It's a hugely important and very compassionate and kind of beautiful aspect of the story.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that struck me, again, when I was very much at the beginning of just trying to figure out what the facts were and what I could do with it, was the sort of gender confusion that ran through both of their biographies. And so with Cher, the entire time she was alive and doing her heroic exploits, and just for those who don't know, like the big thing, I mean, she flew a ton of missions. She was an incredible bird. But her final one, and the one that made her famous, is that the Lost Battalion, when they were behind German lines, became surrounded by the enemy, and the US Army had to try to save them. And one of the things they did was they thought they were shelling the Germans, and it was a friendly fire incident, and they were shelling their own men. And so Cher is the one who carried the message. Whittlesey wrote, like, it ends, "For heaven's sake, stop it." You know, he's just like begging to be spared, and it worked. She saved them. But the whole time she was doing all this, they thought she was a male bird. And so it was he, even her name, Cher, those of you who study Romance languages know, you know, French is gendered. And so Cher reflects that they thought she was a boy. But when they went to taxidermy her, and she's in the Smithsonian because she was so important that when she died, they put her in the Smithsonian. And I've gone to see her, and I recommend it. It's amazing. The taxidermist found that she was a female. And so I just thought this was really interesting. And some of the historical record has been corrected, but the Smithsonian still hasn't even corrected it. They just like stuck to the old story. And I thought that was really interesting. And when I got into pigeons, I found that this is a phenomenon. And I think, you know, in the animal world, there's like gay animals too. There's, you know, homosexual relationships. And so there's this phenomenon that pigeon fanciers call henny cocks and cocky hens, not to get too far down the pigeon wormhole, but it's when you have a bird that presents physically with one gender, but acts as the other gender, which I think is very cool and non-binary. So I just thought that was really interesting about Cher and says a lot about like our ideas about who can be a hero. You know, the default assumption is that a hero is a man, even if it's a bird. And I thought that was interesting. And then Whittlesey, a lot of people have asked me about this, including Whittleseys. I've been contacted by some Whittleseys, some Whittlesey relatives, and they've been very interested in this. And I write Charles Whittlesey as a gay character, a character who, because it's 1918, has to keep his sexuality to himself. He's a sexually active gay man. He has a life. He has lovers. I didn't want to write like a tragic, lonely, you know, gay figure who's celibate or anything like that. I wanted to show that he could have been part of this subculture that did exist. But he didn't leave a journal. He didn't leave a diary. If I were a biographer, I couldn't like prove it. But there are many things that the historical record reflects that suggest he had to be gay. And some of it is just those euphemisms like confirmed bachelor, never had time for the ladies, no woman involved. He at one point referred to himself as a misfit, which was heavy, heavy code for a queer person to describe themselves to a straight person. And so I can't prove it, so I couldn't write it as nonfiction, but I'm pretty sure, and I thought that was interesting too, because still, even in 2020, there are people who have qualms about queer heroes or thinking that that's who a war hero could be. And so I thought the fact that both of them sort of had this, I just knew I had to include it. Like I couldn't write it without talking about that.
It's so powerful, and it does. It makes us question every assumption, every cliche, and what it takes to be here. And that Cher and me has to constantly deal with this. Like some of the caretakers know that she's female, but most don't. So it's kind of running disguise that she didn't want, which is really interesting. And of course, Whittlesey brings incredible dignity and intelligence to his leadership. So there's so much in this novel that's incredibly vivid, you know, including the horrible World War I battlefields, you know, the trenches, the funk holes, as you call them, the disgusting lack of any food or any way to get clean or to get healed. And I wonder, your research on this just had to be phenomenal beyond the pigeons and Whittlesey himself. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your research and how you kind of both saturate your novel with all that you learned, but also pull back from it and write about it in a way that's often really lyrical and that keeps the story moving.
Thank you.
I think that's a really tough balance.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, and that's one of the things I wanted to do. But with that, like factualness and lyricalness, I didn't want to romanticize war, and I was trying really hard, and readers can tell me if I did it or not. I was trying to write an anti-war novel without being agenda-y, but just to write the kind of book that you couldn't get to the end of it and think, I wish I'd been there, or like that sounds kind of horrible but kind of fun. I was trying to really, I'm very anti-war, and I know there's people who think it's inevitable, but I consider that a failure of imagination. I think we don't have to fight wars. I think humans do a lot of stuff they don't have to do, but I think we could stop. And so thank you for observing that. And I, you know, to kind of speak to that, like the research was super intense. And so this is a thing I say, you know, all the time when I talk about research. It's my favorite part of a book because it's so fun. And, you know, I mean, you know, your book is so like researching all these like forgotten figures, and I mean, it's a fun phase, and it's all pure potential energy because it could be the best ever, you know, before you start writing. But I tried to do two things, one of which was read about the era, like looking back, and Paul Fussell's book, Great War and Modern Memory, is, for my money, the best nonfiction kind of literary study of what World War I meant. But of course, it came out decades and decades after, so that helped me. But then I also tried to read in the era, like what, you know, was written about it in the newspapers, and then also a lot of these guys. There was this guy, John Nell, who was a member of the Lost Battalion, and he wrote a memoir. And I read it, and it's really moving. He self-published it. It's very rough. He's not a writer at all. He clearly is not that educated, but he just writes his experience super raw as it happened. And so I tried to strike that balance of like very distant, like you say, kind of this more removed lyrical what does it mean? And then also this very visceral, I was there, it was horrible balance. And then I also, every time I talk about this book, have to give a shout out to my dad, who was in the military and who often taught military history classes. And, he always had books around when we were growing up. And he's the first person who taught me about World War I. And I remember, like looking in the books and seeing pictures and learning about trench warfare. And just even as a kid, not being able to comprehend what an annihilating experience that was, and how horrible, like you say, like to be in the trenches, to be surrounded by mud, to be covered in body lice, to maybe get trench foot, maybe get gangrene, maybe be eaten alive by rats. And then when it was time to go over the top, somebody blows a whistle and you all climb out and go into this field, which is covered with landmines and barbed wire, and the enemy has machine guns. And the thing about it was, and then I'll wrap it up, but this the tension of old and new, which I think goes to your question too, they had this old world idea of what war was, which was if you just had soldiers who had the right moral character, who had the right education, who were trained to be brave enough, it would be kind of a test of wills, and the best will would win, which was very old and very 19th century and before. And then it was mixed with this 20th century technology of gas and machine guns and airplanes and tanks. And they learned over 4 years the very, very hard way that will doesn't beat a machine gun. And I think that's one of the things that I wanted to show.
Yes, it's very much an anti-war novel, which I was so struck with. I mean, I would put it up there with the classics. And because it has some humor, I kept thinking of like Catch-22 and even some of Vonnegut, because it's so imaginative. And these are crucial stories and books. You make a real point as the story goes on about how, Whittlesey himself says that his knowledge of war was all in literature, that it was stories, and he knows immediately that's gone, that's wrong. But then when he survives, also, to back up, there's so much irony in the story of the Lost Battalion, because they were not lost. They succeeded in their mission beyond all expectations, and then were killed for it, suffered for it, because they succeeded and everyone else failed. So there was the friendly fire and then the complete isolation, and nobody could believe they had done what they were supposed to do. So even when you're your best, it's to your own detriment, which is, a bitter thing about war. But then, so they survive. Cher is grievously injured, but as a bird, she's treated almost like a person, that she's given a prosthetic leg and they fix her up, which is, very touching. But then, they send her to America to kind of go on parades and all this stuff. They do the same to Whittlesey, who really just wants to get back to his private life. And there's a great scene, and this is because I find this writer so fascinating that I was really excited, but everyone should be intrigued by this, where he meets a certain newspaper man, short story writer named Damon Runyon.
Yeah.
And what an encounter. And could you talk a little bit about why you brought Runyon into your book?
Yeah, so Damon Runyon, I recommend him. I think if, people haven't had the pleasure, go back and read him. His columns and his coverage is so, he's covering all this great stuff from mostly a New York perspective, but he's got all the slang and the guys and the dolls and the tomatoes and all that. But I think one of the things that, made me want to include him is because the Lost Battalion was part of this bigger set of men called the 77th, and it was called often the Metropolitan Division, and it was called that because it was all men from New York, and it was men from 43 different countries, because New York was such an immigrant city, continues to be such an immigrant city. We're such a country of immigrants, and so many immigrants from all over fought in World War I. And because New York was, and to this day remains, largely such a media center, such a journalism center, the 77th as the Metropolitan became kind of the mascot, even before the Lost Battalion. This was who the New York papers were writing about, because it was, everybody from all over, from, Washington Heights down to Hell's Kitchen. It was a New York battalion. And so I wanted to show that, but I couldn't just say that in a very nonfiction-y way, like I just did, that like very ungainly, rambling answer I just gave. So I was like, who can show this? I was like, Damon Runyon. So I just put him over there, and that was, I just kind of made that up. So it wasn't based on like a real encounter, but I was like, he was writing about it at the time. He would have been around, and I was like, what if? That's the beauty of being a fiction writer. You can be like, I'm gonna see what happens when Damon Runyon talks to Charles Whittlesey, and let that happen.
It's really great, very effective. And, you know, again, just reminds us of who gets to write history, who gets to tell the stories. And World War I was, you know, for many years romanticized, and there was a feeling there was going to be another. It was not the war to end all wars, obviously, and the interwar interim was, you know, a really tough, terrible time with the Great Depression and so many other things that went wrong. So that the story just kept sort of evolving, and the pursuit of truth, you know, sort of intensified after the Second World War. So it's really interesting to go back to the first. I noticed, you know, there were just a lot of really interesting ways that you paralleled the two characters. And one, and this is just another, I think because you're a poet, that you repeat the first sentence of each. When Jeremy starts, she says the first sentence. When it turns over to Whittlesey, you repeat that sentence again. Can you talk a little bit about that structure and what the rhythm between them is in the book?
Yeah, thanks for noticing. I mean, it's pretty conspicuous, so it's probably not that hard to notice, but yeah, that device came to me early on. Like, I knew that I wanted to have an alternating point of view. Like, I knew that if I was going to write the book, I couldn't just tell it as Whittlesey, and I couldn't just tell it as Cher. I needed both. And the way that I tried to ease that transition from chapter to chapter, because if you read it, it goes pretty much A-B pattern. It's Cher, Whittlesey, all the way to the end. And so I give them each, like you say, the shared first line. And I'm going to offer my take on it, but I think if readers have different takes or additional takes, I welcome those, because I hope it's not doing just one thing. But one of the reasons that I had them say the same thing was to kind of show that they both endured the same experience. And so that was like a touchstone, like they were both there in the same place. So I wanted to tell you, like, you're hearing about this from the pigeon, and then you're hearing about this from the soldier. But then their accounts after that first sentence in each chapter is totally different. Like, not totally, I mean, it's not unrecognizable, but the things they notice and the things that imprint on them are different. And so I wanted to kind of show two things with that. One, I mean, facts matter, history matters, the truth is out there in 2020, under the current regime, there is truth and we need to find it. But within that is subjectivity. And so I was really intrigued by the fact that it's this great historical event, World War I, that everyone knows, but within that there's an infinite variety of subjective experiences of what that would be like. So that's one thing. And then second, without getting preachy, and this is why I like fiction too, because I can hold stuff up and show it to people and they can decide what they want to do with it. I think that we can extend personhood to animals. And I think by having Whittlesey and Cher and me share that first sentence was me saying that we're not that different, and that we're not, as much as humans often like to hold themselves as superior or separate from the animal world and the natural world, we're part of it, we're of nature, we can't get out of it, we're all the same.
Yeah, beautifully put. And certainly of the many revelations of this book is to remind us how many animals serve in the military without volunteering, certainly. And that's a really profound thing to think about. So I really appreciated that aspect of it. I guess I'm looking at the time, and I think we have questions from the audience. So I'm going to thank you so much, Kathleen, for speaking with me. And let's see if we have some audience questions. I can always come back with more questions if we still have time.
Donna, did you want to do them from the Q&A, or do you want me to read them?
Sure, I can do that.
Pardon?
Oh, I can read them, Cheryl. I can read them.
Okay.
Yeah, so here's one from Becca. Is there a long history of armies using carrier pigeons to aid with battles?
Yes, Becca, great question. There is, and I think that was one of the things that surprised me, because again, I consider myself like a pigeon fan, and I knew that pigeons were instrumental in World War One and World War Two. And I think the thing about World War One that was extra interesting to me is that technologically, we humans were so close to having two-way communication. We were super, super close to having two-way radio, but we only had radio that could put out a signal and be received. The people couldn't send a message back. And we had telephones, but it was so clunky and analog that there were these long wires that could be easily cut. And that was a huge tactic of both sides, was to chop those means of communication. And so in World War One, your best means of communication were runners, like actual guys who ran the messages, and guys in motorcycles, and pigeons. So I knew all about that. And then I knew that continued in World War Two, because pigeons are so reliable. Even in World War Two, when they had two-way radio, there were often situations, especially code situations, where it would be better, rather than speaking on a line where somebody could hear you, to write a code and let a pigeon carry it. So that being said, as I dug deeper, I found that all the way back, in almost every culture, pigeons were used, not just for war, but all kinds of things. Like Julius Caesar is probably the first example in the West of someone using pigeons, and he used pigeons to report on his conquests of Gaul. He sent them back with news of what he'd done. And then Genghis Khan, this isn't for war, but it's interesting. His empire was so vast and went all the way from Asia way across to Eastern Europe. And he set up a pigeon post from different outposts to kind of set up a way of communicating with all these distant parts of his empire. And then also you had pigeons in, I think it was the 7th century in Greece, carried the message of the results of the Olympic Games. If you want to go back to the Bible, technically a dove is a pigeon. And so Noah, I think people forget, in the Bible, Noah sends out a raven and the raven just leaves. The raven's like, later losers, I'm out. And the dove is who he sends second. And the dove, AKA the pigeon, is who comes back with that branch that says land is near. So yeah, so people have used, and then all the way up to like the Franco-Prussian War and tons of smaller European conflicts. The Rothschilds, the famous financial family, had a pigeon post that was just for them, that they used in the Franco-Prussian War, and then also to send them news of stock markets from all over Europe, which is part of what helped them build their financial savvy, which I think is very cool. So good question, Becca.
Wow, I love that. Fascinating. All right, let's try this one. How do you reveal in the book, this is also from Becca, how do you reveal in the book the training required to make these pigeons useful to the armies?
Great question. So people, when you write historical fiction, I love this question. People want to know who's real and who's made up. And to do this sort of training, I got to make up 2 characters. And one was John, who you saw briefly in that part that I read, who was the farmer on Wright Farm, who was the guy who, you kind of see him, he raises Cher from a baby, from an egg, and trains her to be like a racing homer where she wins lots of prizes for being the fastest bird. And then my second, made up pigeon training character is Bill Cavanaugh, who every unit would have had several pigeon men, usually at least 3, because people got killed so much you didn't want to have just one. And they would carry the pigeons on their backs and also be responsible for feeding them and sending them up. And so I made up Bill Cavanaugh. And then I also made up a third who was based on a real guy who I actually found in the historical record. I call him Corporal Galt. But if you read the book, you kind of get Cherami's evolution from being kind of a hobby or a pet. John sort of racing her for a purse on the weekends as a way to make a little extra money and have fun, to Corporal Galt, he loves pigeons, but he's very like by the books and very business, to Bill Cavanaugh, who I make this Irish-American guy from Hell's Kitchen who keeps pigeons on the lofts. Because that's the thing, like until recently, and per the trivia question, and I love the answers coming in on the trivia, per the pigeon question about, the pejorative, I won't reveal the answer, but until very, very, very recently, humans and pigeons were like so closely intertwined. And so Bill is who I use to show that even in urban environments, people kept them as pets, loved them, had much mutual affection. So I think if you're a pigeon fan and read the book, you'll get a lot of deep pigeon training montages.
Oh, for sure. Amazing facts about pigeons. All right, this is from Stephen. When did you start writing this work? How much time from beginning to end of putting words together until it was published?
Yeah, I started, I first learned about Cher thanks to Brian in like 2013. And then I started researching in 2014 because I'm a professor, which is a job I adore, and also gives you that cool schedule where you're off in the summer. So in the summer of 2014, after I finished my academic year, I went to the Smithsonian and saw Cher in her case in the World War I exhibit. And then I started getting all my books and things like that. So I spend a lot of time in the research phase. So I think I spent at least a year just researching and not trying to write anything. I mean, I would jot stuff down, but I tried to just fill up on facts. And then I'm a big outliner, which not every writer is, but I always plot things out very meticulously because I need to know where I'm going, and I need to know how things end. And so I think I started writing it in 2015, and then that was a real sprint. Once I start writing, I just write it. And so I think it was done in 2016, but that's just a draft. And so at that point I sent it out to different readers. I have lots of good friends who read stuff for me and give me feedback. So at that point I sent it out, made edits, sent it out again, made edits, sent it to my agent, made edits. And then to wrap up, the full timeline, my agent, Lisa Bancroft, who's amazing, gave me a bunch of feedback in 2018. And then she sent it out on submission in early 2019, and we sold it to Penguin in the spring of 2019. So to recap, 2013 is when Brian first made me aware of Cher, and then 2019 is when my agent sold it. So novels can take a minute. They take a while.
Yes. Oh, and it's so much work. I think the revising is where you really can be creative and do it, but it is tough work. And you also run a publishing place. I don't know how you do all this. It's very impressive.
I like to be busy.
Yeah, right. Especially now, it's been a real sanity saver. All right. So Brian, I believe this is your student. How did you craft the voice of Cher, giving a voice to the seemingly voiceless? And yes, from your former student. Thank you, Brian.
Yes. And Brian is an attorney now, so he's doing very well for himself. So my compliments to Brian. But yeah, how I give voice to the pigeon, I love this question. And I think the model that I held in my head, and I didn't realize this until I was talking to Rick Kogan on WGN on Sunday. He's such a good interviewer. He helped me realize something that I hadn't said at all before. And I was like, whoa. So here, I'll say it to you. There's this great writer called Don Marquis, Marquis, and he was a newspaper man of the 20th century, and he had these two great characters, Archie and Mehitabel. And Archie was a cockroach, and Mehitabel was a cat. And Archie as a cockroach would come in. Don Marquis's thing was Archie came in and hopped on the keys of his typewriter at night in the newsroom when Don Marquis was away. And Archie would hop from key to key and type these, usually poems, sometimes prose, that observed humanity. And the thing, I highly recommend these to everyone listening. Even if you're I don't really like poetry, it's so good. Because Archie, as a cockroach, loves humans. He can't live without them. He needs our trash. He needs our dropped food. He is bound to us inextricably, but he doesn't get us. He is perplexed by a lot of the things that we do, our bigotries and our hatreds and our prejudices and our predilections. And so I think Don Marquis was my model because he writes this character, Archie, who's very funny, but very profound because Archie's perplexed. So I think I was trying to channel Archie in Cher and Me, where I was creating this pigeon who wouldn't be a cartoon. I didn't want to just be like, me a pigeon, me no understand humans. That would be terrible. But I didn't want to anthropomorphize her to the extent that she sounded just like Charles Whittlesey. That would be too much. Like I didn't want her to be a human. So I think, Brian, to answer your question, I was trying to strike that balance where I could get a little bit of satire in, but not make it too heavy-handed or too corny about how pigeons are different from people.
That's really interesting. I didn't know about Archie. Certainly, Cher and Me reflects on a lot of aspects of humankind, including there's a great passage where she's talking to other pigeons about how pigeons come in all different colors and it's no big deal. Why is that such a big deal to humans that we're in different colors? So, great opportunity to thresh things out in fiction. I think that's it for our audience questions. Stephen says, thank you. I was really impressed with the amount of research that I suspected had to be done.
Kathleen,
So
can I ask
Cheryl?
a question?
Yeah, of course, Cheryl, go ahead.
So, you know, as I was reading your book and in several places, Whit is walking around the city, and every time I would come through those passages, there was this kind of poignancy about it that made me think of Lillian Boxfish.
Oh,
Was that
yeah.
is that intentional, or I mean, is walking kind of I know you do a lot of walking, and is that just, you know, something that kind of goes into your work just because?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I think what was weird to me in a cool way was as I was writing about Whittlesey, I realized that he would have been in New York City, like in Manhattan. And he really did live in the boarding house, you know, the rooming house that I have him living in, for real, in Midtown. And he would have been there right before Lillian Boxfish came to the city, because Lillian in that book comes to the city in 1926, and Whit leaves the city forever in 1921. And they both kind of come to the city for the same reasons, to kind of get away from their small town, provincial life and be kind of nonconformist and live in a way that they couldn't live if they stayed where they were from. And so I think Cheryl, that's a great observation. I kind of just leaned into it and was like, I'm going to show Whit kind of reveling in this freedom. And then the other thing that as I, you know, because I'm not a pigeon and I'm not a gay World War I veteran. And so I wanted to write both of those things in an empathetic and compassionate way. And one of the things that I noticed in my research for Whit, you know, I think a lot of times we think that, you know, not present company, but that gay people are a recent invention, or like Stonewall happened and then everything happened. But there were these communities of queer people way before that. And one of the ways that, you know, a gay man in New York City would have met other gay men is walking around. And so you get this sort of look at him sort of walking through the city, sometimes just walking, and then other times looking to meet someone who might be like-minded. And so I think I had fun imagining where he would have walked. And then of course, at the beginning, there's the part where he goes to the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, up on, you know, way up in like the 100 and whatevers, and Riverside Drive. And so I had fun with that, and sort of, you know, and that's there if you, I mean, we can't, I know travel's hard right now, but you can go if you wanted to, and you could sit where Whit sat, just like you can go where Lillian went, which I think is cool. Great question.
Donna, there's a, Stephen had said, and actually this is, just for fun, Cheryl brings up urban pigeons. The riddle question we've had for a long time is, have you ever seen a baby pigeon? And I know you can answer this one.
Yes, I was just going to ask you that.
Right?
Great question. Thank you, Stephen. This is the perfect, potentially last question before we like reveal the trivia answers. I have, and I love the experience of seeing them because I had that same question, because you walk through a city and there's so many pigeons and you're like, where do they come from? Because you never see a baby pigeon, or at least I hadn't. But then one of the things I like about Zoom events is like right there behind me is my kitchen back there. And outside the kitchen door is our little back porch, a very classic Chicago, wooden back porch. And while I was writing this book, a pigeon couple moved in under the eaves. And so naturally, because humans like to name things and get very attached, Martin and I named them Walter Pigeon, after the great actor and pigeon pun, and Coup d'etat, because pigeon pun. And they raised 2 babies, and pigeons always raise 2 babies. They lay 2 eggs, and it's always a pair. And so they hatched 2 babies, and we saw the babies, and they were so cute. I mean, it looked horrible, like baby birds look so vulnerable and like no feathers, but they were so cute. And so we named them Molly Wingwald and Feather Locklear. And we watched them raise them from, eggs to babies to fledglings to they're off in the world now. And so to that, I have to say, you didn't ask this, but I'll go on. One of the things I love about writing a book is the connections it brings up, not just when you're researching, but after the book comes out. And when those pigeons were living there, it was all I could talk about. If you were my friend, I was just like, blah, 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 Walter and Coo, Molly and Feather. And I told this to my family too, but my dad never said a word until the book came out and he read it. And he was like, by the way, did you know I raised homing pigeons? And I was like, what? Like, I had no idea. And so he talked about baby pigeons too, and how they're always in pairs, and how last story, my dad had a pigeon named Lucky that he loved in the 1960s in Nebraska. And he called him Lucky because he was part of a pair, but one of the eggs didn't hatch and only Lucky's egg hatched. So that's why he was Lucky. And so he knew Lucky from when he was an egg to a baby to a full grown bird. And he just, now I know to ask him about Lucky because he just loved that bird so much. So baby pigeons are pretty cute.
Well, I want to thank you both so much. This has been a great deal of fun, and you both are fabulous. I'm huge fans. I'm a huge fan of you all.
Thank you. And thank you, Donna, so much. Great question.
Thank you.
Right. So
Thank you, Kathleen. A pleasure.
I can tell you that the winners of your book, one is Joan Flanagan. So the pejorative is actually rats with wings.
Yeah.
But we got close with a flying rat, so that's good. So Joan, you get a book, and then Becky, you came in second, and you're going to get a wind-up pigeon, which I'm really jealous of. I might have to get one for myself as well. And then for the second question, Steve, you came in first, and you'll be getting a book. There were, let's see, how many were there? 100,000. You came the closest. And Nikki, you're second. So you'll be getting a wind-up pigeon. So thank you all for coming. This has been a great deal of fun. Thank you very much. And I hope we can see you at the club sometime real soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Stay well.
Bye.
Bye, Kathleen.